Are you interested in learning about chestnuts? I'm Ben Martis with Wild Sprout Nursery and the Permaculture Nursery podcast, and you are not going to want to miss this video. I recently had a really great opportunity to sit down with Michael Dolan of Ridge Nursery, who's been growing chestnuts in the Pacific Northwest for over 40 years. So lots and lots of experience there. We really talk about everything to do with chestnuts, from varieties to grafting to growing conditions to using it as a food source. It's really a great primer for anybody who's interested in growing chestnuts. Just so you know, there were some audio difficulties, technical difficulties during the second half of this video when we're walking around in the chestnut orchard. I added some text there where it's hard to hear, and there's basically we had one of our lapel mics was not working properly, and so it's a little bit unfortunate, but there's still some really great information in that part. We start off by sitting down in the greenhouse and having a chat for a while, and then we move out into the chestnut orchard. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Michael Dolan of Ridge Nursery. And don't forget to check out burntridgenursery.com if you're looking for chestnut trees. That's Michael Dolan's website. They have some really amazing trees there. I've ordered from them myself, and best of luck to you there. Yeah, Michael Dolan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I was here about 6 years ago and was really inspired by what I saw. And then also, you're one of those guys who's been around in the Northwest since the 80s. And when I first reached out to you, I expressed that, at least from what I know or I've heard of, there's really only a small handful of people, maybe even less than that, who have been doing this kind of work this long. So like you have mature tree agroforestry like systems, and so with that, I feel like you're like a really key knowledge holder when it comes to nut trees, in particular chestnuts, and their applicability and how it can be used for like the future of food use. And so you started the nursery back in 1980, and this is what, 21 acres?
That's correct. Yes, I started it. I bought the property in January of 1980 as logged over, uncleared land, and so I had to start from scratch. I had to deal with 5-foot old growth stumps, and but I cleared a little land where the house is now, and to start a garden and to start a nursery. And because a lot of the plants that I wanted to grow were not commercially available, and if they had been, I wouldn't have been able to afford them anyway. So,
Right.
So it's been a long learning curve, especially concerning chestnuts, because when I first started, I wanted to grow chestnuts, and I read the literature. In fact, I joined the Northern Nut Growers Association, an organization that dated back to 100 years ago, of amateur and professional nut tree growers, and these people have published several handbooks. The Handbook of North American Nut Tree Culture in North America, are several of the books that I purchased that were written by the members of that organization, and they talked about chestnuts. They had chapters on chestnuts, and they talked about growing Chinese chestnuts, because Chinese chestnuts were what they could grow in the eastern United States to deal with the introduced chestnut blight fungus that wiped out the American chestnut, the dominant hardwood 100 years ago. That was completely wiped out by an introduced fungal blight from Asia. It turns out that Chinese chestnuts and Japanese chestnuts were resistant to the fungus. And so that's what they recommended. And that's what I got. And I got seeds of those and planted them out. And I wasted a dozen years doing that, because the Chinese chestnuts were from a part of China that was a hot part of China, and more comparable to like Georgia than Western Washington. Western Washington is about the coolest climate in the lower 48, so we're comparable to Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. So the Chinese chestnuts were not well adapted here. The trees grew fine here. I couldn't get the nuts to produce.
That's one of the things, because you'll go to some of these other nurseries, and they'll be selling Chinese chestnuts, and because they do grow well here, but growing well doesn't necessarily translate to them producing well, which is what we
exactly
want,
right. Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah. So what I did, and in great frustration, I started looking around at old homesteads and, found trees that I could identify in Western Washington and Western Oregon and Eastern Washington too, that were producing well here. And so I got starts on some of those different varieties. And some of those varieties, like I got starts from varieties in Eastern Washington that I thought, well, these are from Washington, they ought to do well here. They didn't do that well either.
And how were you finding these chestnuts? Like people, were you through the Nut Growers Association contacts that way? Or?
Mostly visual, driving around, bicycling around, and looking for chestnut trees, and that sort of thing. Yeah. But also through contacts, sure, organizations and such, and people would tell me about them. But at any rate, so the upshot was, some of the trees that I've found just traveling around that have done well, I've named. They were just wild growing seedlings.
Yeah.
But that someone had planted 100, 150 years ago.
Right.
And I named them because we had to call them something. And others were varieties that were that I introduced. I introduced about 70 varieties over the years into North America through a very complicated introduction process. Chestnut blight was a classic example of ecological devastation by an introduced fungus,
right?
Which is why the quarantine procedures that are in place are critical to keeping pathogens out, diseases and pests. And so when I introduced varieties from Europe and Asia and such, they were in quarantine for years. The cyanwood had to be, I just brought them as sticks of cyanwood, and they had to be examined by the USDA and by the state inspector, and then they had to be sterilized, and then I had to grow them in quarantine for years before they could be released to the outdoors.
I think that's a great point for people listening. A lot of people, like myself included in the past, have I've not brought material from other countries over, but you might feel inclined without really understanding what the consequences could be for bringing material over from other countries. So that, like as you said, that quarantine process is very important.
Yeah, we introduced an apple variety from New Zealand as a stick of cyanwood. Turns out it's the most nutritious apple on earth. It's called Monty's Surprise, and highlighted in a food writer's book, Joe Robinson's book, Eating on the Wild Side, which highlights the lost nutritional quality and flavor profiles in our fruits and vegetables. And she, in doing her research, she found out about this variety, Monty's Surprise apple from New Zealand. Turns out it's the most nutritious apple variety on earth, and she was a customer of ours. She wanted to get one for herself in the process of her research and such. And so she asked me if I could find a source of that for her, and it wasn't available in North America. So we went through the process of introducing it into North America as a stick of cyanwood of this Monty's Surprise apple. It took like 10 years. 10 years in quarantine.
Wow.
And the reason why it took so long is the apple industry is very important in North America. And it turns out that stick of cyanwood from New Zealand had a virus in it that was unknown in North America.
Oh,
so they had to kill the virus before they could release that stick of cyanwood.
Wow.
And which took years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And then there was a flub up in the bureaucracy that delayed the release of the variety 3 years, just because they didn't do all their paperwork properly. So that was aggravating. So the quarantine procedure is aggravating, and it can be expensive too.
Sure.
But you have to deal with a lot of bureaucrats, but it's necessary.
Right.
It's critical.
Right.
At any rate, so I brought in varieties from Korea and Australia and Portugal and France and Spain and Italy, and a lot of those didn't amount to much. Some of them are our best varieties now, the best varieties that we have in Western Washington by far.
Yeah.
And so that's mostly what we're.
Do you also offer Monty Surprise to this day?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're sold out right now, but yeah. Actually, I think we just put a few more into inventory. But at any rate, it's a variety that we'll offer every year now. Yes.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So your primary one of your primary interests when you first got started was chestnuts. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about like what the early days of the nursery looked like. I mean, compared to what it is now, like a very successful nursery business, many different things that you're doing here. You're selling produce. You're selling I don't know how many thousands of plants, trees every year now. You have employees, you have office space. You said you just made additions this year with adding coolers. What did the early days of Burnt Ridge Nursery look like? It was just you and your wife, is that correct?
Oh no, I was by myself.
You were by yourself.
Yeah, I didn't have a dog.
Okay.
I didn't have a cat. I didn't have a house. I built a shack from salvage material, which I lived in until Carolyn came along, and she was not going to live in a shack. So we built a house, got married, and that was like 9 years later. So the first 9 years I was living under pretty primitive conditions. But now she has good business skills, which I lacked and everything, and office skills and computer skills, and I'm an outdoors guy, so it's a good combination, But no, I started out by myself, just clearing the land, starting the nursery, and it's just been a slow progression from there. Now. Yeah.
Well, how were you selling plants at that time when you first started? Just local.
I was wholesaling. I was wholesaling it. I had a job over at Rain Tree Nursery. The former owner, Sam Benowitz, hired me to work for him as a salesperson and to help do grafting and writing his catalog. And he was interested in some of the things that I was starting to grow in my nursery. So he became my first customer as wholesaler.
Yeah.
And then I put out a 2-page sheet to retail, and it turned into a 4-page sheet. And now it's a 40-page catalog. And although most of our business is from our website, Burnt Ridge Nursery. We ship all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, one of the aspects of this podcast is kind of like helping people who are starting nurseries like understand some of the different avenues they have to grow plants. And like myself, like I never even considered selling retail or wholesale until actually this year. Instead of like trying to do local plant sales and selling your plants that way, trying to like make flyers and stuff, just going around to the different nurseries that might be around you, or grocery stores that sell plants in the spring. Maybe just did you ever do any of that? Like, or was it was just all wholesale through?
I did wholesale to other growers who wanted to plant out orchards, and then after a few years, like I say, I started putting out my own list, and then it just kind of grew from there. Now we put out a catalog every year. We send out about 50,000 catalogs a year to past customers or people who have requested our catalog.
Okay. Yeah. What first got you interested in chestnuts? Like why chestnuts?
Well, chestnuts. The thing I like about chestnuts now is that it's a crop I really like to eat. So we're still eating chestnuts on a weekly. Here it is May, and we're still eating chestnuts out of our coolers. In the last week, I've used them in a casserole, in a stuffing, and in a soup. And while we're roasting chestnuts, we're also eating them. We eat a lot of them just as roasted, just without any additions. But it's a nice staple food that's easy to grow here. Now that we've identified varieties that work well here, I get a crop every year because they bloom in the summer. They bloom in July around here, which means they're never affected by a late frost. Now that I've identified varieties that work well in this climate zone, we've had a superb crop every single year.
Yeah.
No crop failures. And they come in a prickly husk Now, our farm is surrounded by forest. They come in a prickly husk that is a very effective deterrent against jays and squirrels and other critters from getting at the nuts until they're dead ripe. Then we go out and pick them every day. And we get an excellent price for the nuts. And they're very high value nuts. You know, most of the consumption of chestnuts in North America is from imports from China, Korea, and Italy. Those are not poor countries, and they have to be fumigated to get into this country. So there's a great potential for a huge expansion of domestic production of chestnuts in North America. There's a big untapped market that's met by imports right now, and there's also a lot of things you can do in processing with chestnuts. Make them into flour, make beer out of them, and so it's and then the chestnut wood is also very high value wood. So it's fast growing, it's rot resistant, it splits easily, it's rot resistant even when it's young, and it's got. There's a lot of different utilizations with chestnut, and it's got a lot going for it. In addition to the fact that it's a wonderful tasting nut, and nutritionally, it's a lot like rice. It's a carbohydrate. It's easier to grow than rice or wheat. I mean, it's growing wheat would. You can grow wheat here, but it's very labor intensive.
Right.
Very labor intensive. And chestnuts are not labor intensive. All I have to do pretty much is go out and pick up the nuts when each variety is dropping, and then refrigerate them. Either that or dry them for long-term storage. But
that is what most people kind of. Make the analogy of chestnuts to being like rice or corn because of the starch, the carbohydrate content. I'm wondering, like, when I first started experimenting with chestnuts, one of the first things I was thinking about was like, hey, what if this could completely cut out all the grains for like a poultry type of system? Sure. Have you heard of or have you tried that before, or heard of other people like feeding poultry like only on chestnuts? Or of course you got to supplement them on pasture and things, but as far as like the grain aspect of that, using chestnuts instead.
Well, if you go like in Europe, for example, where there are extensive chestnut forests, and there's also domestic escaped hogs, so feral hogs, chestnut fed to pork, to wild boars and such, is premium quality meat, very premium quality meat, and my dog liked chestnuts. Pretty much all critters will eat chestnuts.
Yeah.
So turkeys, there was a huge crash in the turkey population when the American chestnut forest was wiped out.
Sure.
There's certainly a lot of all the creatures seem to like chestnuts. That's for sure. Yeah. So it's it's just I would say the biggest thing is that it's such a high value nut that it would be not the best use of the crop, maybe for culls to go to the critters, but when you can get like $8 a pound in the shell for the nuts, then
maybe you don't want to be just depends on what you got going on. I've heard mixed information about like the shelf stability of chestnuts. I've heard like basically you want to keep them in cold storage, or because if you let them out, they'll get super hard, and then you have to make them into flour. But if your goal is to make them into flour, like that would be okay. For like somebody who's thinking about doing this for just a home scale use, like what is the truth about the shelf stability of chestnuts?
Well, this week I took some chestnuts out of the crisper of our refrigerator, and
And how long have those been in there?
Well,
Since last season?
Since October.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think we ran across a couple bad ones out of maybe 30, 40, something like that. So at this point, and here it is May, so as long as they're refrigerated, you can keep them. These are fresh nuts now. These have not been dried or anything. If you dry them to rock hardness, then they will keep. You can stick them in a jar like a dried bean, and they'd keep for years.
Sure.
If they're dried to rock hardness, but then they're so hard that they need to be rehydrated, like in the soup pot, or ground up into flour. And chestnut flour is very sweet because when you dry chestnuts, the starches are converted to sugars, and it gets very sweet. They get this. The drier they are, the sweeter they are.
Now, how hard do they actually get when they're dry? Like
a dried bean.
So like a home scale type of grinder would be fine. You wouldn't need anything commercial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any grain grinder would work. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I've eaten a fair bit of chestnuts myself. I harvest them at a local orchard, and one of my things is that I just haven't found like the best way to really process them. Like I was imagining, okay, if I was to make a 5-pound bag of chestnut flour, like I couldn't imagine hand peeling them enough to do that. So like, how do you all primarily process by hand? I'm not familiar with any like regional chestnut processing place that the public could come. That's kind of like a cooperative thing around here.
I don't know of any around here. I know that there's someone in Southwest Washington, south of here, that is processing chestnuts into flour.
Okay.
And there's someone in the Willamette Valley that's processing chestnuts into flour. There's different machines that can be used for that purpose. But I don't know of a regional place. No, that we can take them to. Those are individual farms that are doing it for their own crops. So I don't know if they're taking in material from other growers or not.
So do you make any flour yourself here?
No, I don't. I mean, we have just for trial purposes, but it's we sell the whole crop either as we wholesale part of our crop, and we retail our crop as fresh nuts, and we also sell seed nuts for people who want to grow their own from seed.
Right.
And that takes our whole crop. We've got a lot more demand than we have, so we don't have a lot of incentive to be making it into flour.
Right. So how do you what is your method for processing the chestnuts? Because I guess some varieties I've noticed, what's it called, the pellicle?
Pellicle.
The pellicle sticks to it really. Some
I don't want to grow varieties that have a pellicle that is hard to remove.
Okay.
We've gotten rid of those varieties.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of the problems with just growing seedlings, is that there's too much variability. That's why I'm sitting here grafting chestnuts right now. And we've also developed methods of cloning them on their own roots now, so that we can clone varieties that taste good, that produce well here, and that peel easily. Those are critical components.
So for listeners who don't really know what we're talking about, could you kind of just...
It's a bitter inner skin that adheres, that is between the shell, which is a thin shell. With chestnuts, you don't crack them with a nut cracker, you cut them with a knife, and the thin shell. And inside the thin shell, between the shell and the nut meat, is the pellicle. The pellicle is this brown, very thin layer that kind of tastes like cardboard. It's just and with any good variety, it's easily removed with cooking. So either in a microwave or in a skillet or in an oven, you peel them, which is basically removing the shell. I like varieties where the shell and the pellicle come off at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, where they just pop off pretty easily when they're coming right out of the skillet or right out of the oven. That's what we're looking for.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you prefer to do in the skillet or in the oven? Do you do the
Yeah.
like the cross hatching?
No, I just cut them in half. That way
You
I
cut 'em
never
in
eat a
half.
bad nut.
Yeah.
Cut them
Okay.
in half so I can see what's inside,
Okay.
and just throw them all on the cutting board, chop them all in half,
Right.
and then, you know, in a microwave, it's about 10 to 12 seconds a nut. In a skillet, it's, you know, till they start to smell good, you know, and, you know, shake them a couple times, 5 or 10 minutes, depending on your heat. Yeah.
Okay, so you're going off of smell. You're not not
Well,
visual cue or
Yeah, you know, if they just grab one and see if it's peeling easily.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've done it where
Mhm.
I've boiled them,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to kind of use like thermal gloves or something
Yeah.
to peel them while they're still hot. Because if you
Yeah.
let them cool down, then kind of
Yeah.
it makes it difficult again.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so like so you have extensive chestnut orchards here. Do you have a read? Do you know exactly how many trees you have and like about how many pounds of chestnuts you get on an average year?
Oh, I have trees, you know, I'm constantly evaluating varieties. And if they don't produce well consistently, I'll get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have, you know, trees that are still in the evaluation stage, and I have, you know, 25-year-old, 30-year-old trees. But so the best producers are producing a couple hundred pounds on a tree.
Okay.
Yeah. And they have the potential to produce more than that. I found a tree once in Centralia, Washington, that the owner was burning the nuts. He was raking the leaves, the husks, and the nuts and burning them. So I give this, when we sell chestnuts at the Olympia Farmers Market at our stand, where we sell 4 days a week, we give out these little handouts which describe how do you store chestnuts, what things you can do with them, how do you cook them, all that sort of thing. So I gave him one of those. The next year, he was selling the nuts. He was gathering them up. Now, this is a massive tree in Centralia, Washington. And it was in a residential area. And a lot of the branches extended over 2 streets. And at any rate, he was, since he was harvesting the nuts, he had 2 trees. He had a double lot. The other tree produced about 15 pounds and had nice big nuts. This tree had average size nuts and produced 400 to 1,200 pounds over the course of the next 15 years, a year. 400 to 1,200 pounds a year. So over the next 15 years that I tracked that tree. So I named it the prolific tree.
And, yeah, I have a couple of those.
Yeah, and I have a start of it now in the orchard. And I'm glad that I got a start of it because when he died, the original tree was removed, and it's not there anymore.
Oh, wow.
Because the new owners didn't want to deal with it and
yeah,
didn't appreciate what they had. At any rate, so I have since come to realize that a lot of our varieties, of our better producing varieties, if they were as big as that tree, they'd probably be producing at a similar rate.
Yeah.
You know, they can be immensely productive trees under the right circumstance. And they can do that every year because, like I say, they are summer bloomers. Mm-hmm. They're blooming at a time of the year where late frost is not going to happen, that rainy conditions are not going to happen in July here. So we get a very consistent crop from year to year. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year as the trees get older. Mm. And these are trees that can live hundreds of years. There's chestnut trees on this earth that are over 1,000 years old. So,
that kind of leads me to my next question. If what the oldest chestnut that you've experienced was or is the oldest one you've ever encountered?
Well, the oldest chestnut on earth is probably the tree of 100 horsemen on the slopes of Mount Etna in Sicily. Uh-huh. And that tree is thought to be 2,400 years old. So that tree dates back to when that part of Italy was a Greek settlement. Mm. Yeah. So the Greeks probably brought that tree to Sicily 2,400 plus years ago.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you happen to know if that was like managed like in like a coppicing or like reinvigorated in some way? Like I know hazelnuts in particular, for them to have for longevity, like reinvigorating management practices like coppicing seem to be the way to go. Do you know if that's a similar thing with chestnuts?
Well, yeah, you can chestnuts coppice quite readily. So if you cut a chestnut tree down, you'll get a dozen or 2 dozen new sprouts that'll grow 10 to 12 feet the next summer.
Yeah.
So that's coppicing. So yeah, they're very adept at that. That's why American chestnuts are still around back east, is because they're dying from blight and then they resprout again, only to die from blight again. So it's kind of keeping the blight alive back east. Fortunately, we don't have blight in on the West Coast to speak of. It's very rare to run across any blight on the West Coast. For one thing, the chestnut blight fungus doesn't like our dry summers. It likes hot, humid summers, which we don't have. We don't have hot, humid summers on the West Coast.
Right. So, right. And do you have any American chestnuts here?
Yeah, we do. We have a grove of pure American chestnuts that I'm growing isolated from other chestnuts.
Oh yeah.
And we've also made a selection of American chestnuts to just to make some improvements on the species. I found a guy in North Idaho who had a pure grove of American chestnuts with no other chestnuts, but American chestnuts, a large orchard of seedling American chestnuts. And so from that grove, we selected the best selections for production. And so we've replicated the 3 best ones here. In our own American chestnut grove. So American chestnuts are nice, sweet nuts. They're very tiny, so they don't have a lot of commercial value, except for the fact that they're rare. And as seed nuts for people who want to grow Americans, but they are very susceptible to chestnut blight. They have an excellent timber form, but so does the European chestnut. The European chestnuts get just as massive as American chestnuts in terms of their form as a timber crop, with much larger nuts and heavier yields. So there's absolutely no comparison. 100 plus years ago, 150 years ago, when settlers back east in western Pennsylvania and places like that were cutting down chestnuts, well, people like Thomas Jefferson, when Americans went to France and saw the size of European chestnuts compared to the American chestnuts, they brought back European chestnuts and they started cutting down American chestnuts, harvesting the wood, and then regrafting the stump sprouts over to European chestnuts because the nuts had so much greater commercial potential because of their heavy yield and large size. So there were extensive forests of cut over American chestnuts regrafted to European and European American hybrid chestnuts 100 plus years ago, when the chestnut blight arrived in North America and wiped them all out. Because European chestnuts can also get blight. So but European chestnuts have been some of our best producers here in Western Washington, and also the Europeans also have been dealing with blight since the 1930s. And so what the Europeans did to counteract that, and not only were they dealing with chestnut blight, they were dealing with root rot 150 years ago, and so Phytophthora. And so what they did was they introduced Japanese chestnuts into Europe to not only develop varieties that were resistant to chestnut blight, but also develop varieties that were resistant to root rot, but still maintained the large nuts and the heavy yields of the European and Japanese chestnut. And so Chinese chestnuts are kind of rare in Europe. What you'll find nowadays are European Japanese hybrids in the areas where the blight is a problem. And in some isolated areas, they still grow the pure European strains.
And so, what about Western North America? As far as, is there any native Castanea genus? I know we have the golden Chinquapin, which is not Castanea genus, correct? It's something different.
No, it's
Is it
the old name for it is Castanopsis, which means chestnut-like.
the chestnut like?
Yeah, yeah, but it's quite different from chestnuts uh, in that, for one thing, all of the species and now the two West Coast species are reclassified as Chrysolepsis.
Hmm.
Chrysolepsis chrysophylla and which is our tree form, native to Washington, rarest tree in Washington, but native to Washington, and Chrysolepsis sempervirens, which is a shrub form that's native to Southern Oregon and California. Now the true Castanopsis, which they were formerly classified as, but now revised, are native to Asia, and there are about over 100 species of Castanopsis found in Asia. These are tropical or subtropical trees, for the most part. The one exception is the one species native to Japan, which is more temperate. The nuts tend to be tiny, very tiny, even smaller than American chestnuts.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they're tiny. One distinction between the chestnuts and the Castanopsis is that the Chrysolepsis, in the case of the species native to Western Washington, is that they're evergreen trees. They're broad-leafed evergreen trees.
Oh, okay.
Another distinction is that the nuts take 2 years to ripen.
Right.
They don't ripen in 1 year. They take 2 whole years to ripen. They do have prickly husks, just like a chestnut, which is how they got that association with chestnuts, because the nuts taste kind of similar, but they're tiny. These are pea-sized nuts.
Wow.
So they're extremely labor-intensive.
Yeah.
From large trees.
Yeah, I really want
trees that have the potential to get 70, 80 feet.
Okay.
So making harvest very difficult, needless to say.
Yeah.
When you're talking about pea-sized nuts.
Sure.
Yeah, they also have a more specific range. Like typically, in the wild, you'll find the Chrysolepsis trees in the mountains above a couple thousand feet.
Okay.
So they're not so widely adapted as chestnuts are. So they're in the state of Washington. They're really the rarest tree native to the state. So they're found only in the big lava beds area east of Mount Adams, and in a couple spots in the Southern Olympics. Very rare tree in the state. When you get into Oregon, they're more common. They're found on the slopes of Mount Hood. They're found in the Coast Range and in the Cascades in Oregon. And they're found, in the Sierras in California, where they have the shrub and the tree form. But usually up in the mountains, pretty high up. Yeah.
Okay. So, one thing that you mentioned in one video that you put out is, and it's a use for chestnut leaves that I had never heard before, and that's using chestnut leaves for treating like respiratory, like cough.
Whooping cough.
Whooping cough.
That was a USDA pharmacopoeia, recipe for whooping cough.
Mike, have you tried that before?
I have not, because I've never had whooping cough. But when we were cleaning out my grandmother's attic, 40 years ago, I found a bottle of dried American chestnut leaves dating from 1930s.
Whoa.
That was specifically listed as a remedy for whooping cough. Yeah.
So, what variety of chestnuts are you grafting on right now?
I'm grafting a variety called Bouche de Bétizac, which is a variety that we introduced from France around 1998, and it's a excellent producer of big, broad nuts that taste great. Very consistent producers, and they taste great. They peel easily. And it is also the only variety that I am aware of that is resistant to the chestnut gall wasp, a introduced insect that is a problem with chestnuts in the southeastern United States. It's not a problem on the West Coast. We don't have that wasp here, but I guess it is a problem in the southeastern United States, and this variety is resistant to that.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
Would you mind just kind of going over the basic process here of what you're doing?
well, I collected cyanwood from my Bush de Bettizac tree back in January, and we kept it in refrigeration until an hour ago when I took it out of this plastic bag where we'd stored it in refrigeration with a damp paper towel to keep the humidity level high so that the wood is still dormant. Meanwhile, we grew some Bush de Bettizac seedlings in this crate in this greenhouse last year. And these 1-year seedlings, which are now several feet tall, are being grafted to Bush de Bettizac. So the reason why we're using seedlings of Bush de Bettizac to graft Bush de Bettizac onto is that chestnuts can be kind of semi-notorious for an issue called delayed graft incompatibility. Mm-hmm. And so the way that we can most easily get around that in grafting is to use a rootstock that is as closely related to the cultivar as possible, so that there's much less likely of a problem of delayed graft incompatibility. And so another thing that we're starting to do in the nursery is to get some of our named varieties that we like a lot cloned on their own roots. So we are growing a number of our varieties now as clones in a process similar to how we're propagating hazelnuts as a cloned variety on their own roots. You know, when we clone a tree either from layering or self-rooted or by grafting, it shortens the time to bearing by quite a number of years. And right. It's consistent in what it produces then. There's no variability. When you grow chestnuts from seed, they're going to have the influence of whatever variety pollinated them. So they're not going to grow true from seed.
And how that delayed compatibility or the delayed failure mm-hmm. was something I wanted to ask about. Like, what's like the long, like how many years are we talking that this could happen? It just like one day it just starts dying on you.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't have a whole lot of experience with that because that's what I've decided to do is use seeds of the variety I want to clone as the rootstocks to get around that. But I have read about it in the literature that it can be a problem that can result in an immediate failure or a failure several years down the road. And there's, you know, potentially other things that can cause that too. But that is something that chestnuts can be a problem with. With Chinese chestnuts, it's the delayed graft incompatibility is more of a problem with Chinese chestnut varieties than any other species. Okay. Because Chinese chestnuts can segregate into 4 different distinct phenotypes, none of which are particularly graft compatible with each other. So whereas you know, like all Japanese chestnuts are the same phenotype. They're the same phenotype, and they share that phenotype with European chestnuts. Although European chestnuts can be several different phenotypes. So at any rate, we try and match up the phenotypes as closely as possible. The easiest way to do that is just to use seedlings from the mother variety that we want to propagate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while you're grafting out mm-hmm. here, could you just explain what grafting technique you're using?
Oh, I'm just using the simplest of grafting techniques is a whip graft, where I'm trying to match up the diameter of the cyanwood to the rootstock so that I get a good match on both sides. I'm skipping the tongue part of the whip and tongue graft and just doing a whip graft. So I'm basically eyeballing the diameters of the cyanwood piece to the rootstock diameter. So, you know, I don't have to graft it 4 inches or 6 inches. I can graft it 2 feet, 3 feet, 5 feet, or 2 inches above the roots, wherever the cyanwood matches the diameter of the rootstock. And then I'm cutting the stick to just 1 or 2 buds. And then with a piece of rubber, a grafting rubber, I'm wrapping the 2 pieces together. And by the fall of the year, the grafted part that I'm holding together right now with thumb and forefinger while I'm wrapping this will be as strong as any point on the tree by the fall, if it's a good graft. So now, once I've grafted these, I have to make sure that all of the portion of leaves below and buds below the graft gets removed. But I don't need to do that today. I will come back and do that in the next couple of weeks. I'll remove all of the growth below the graft and force all the new growth from the one bud that was the cyanwood piece.
Okay, so yeah, this is a good just recap for if you're going to be grafting the chestnut trees, worrying about delayed incompatibility, just having this closely using seedlings for using as closely related trees as you can, varieties as you can. So if you could use the same variety, a seedling of certain variety to graft onto, that would be the most ideal.
Yep.
All right, so let's go check out some of the chestnut trees you have out here at the nursery.
All right. I'm just making some slashing cuts.
Oh yeah.
In the rootstock, because this time of the year there's a lot of sap rising, and by making a couple of slashing cuts at the nodes, it helps create a sap release valve that the sap can flow through the cuts I just made instead of flooding the grafting units.
Why would you not want the sap flooding the graft union?
It would prevent the union from taking place.
It will. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah. It's a problem with chestnuts and especially with grafting walnuts. But with chestnuts it can be a problem too. So just a simple way of preventing that. So I'm just painting the tops here.
That's just the grafting compound, or
it's just tree paint.
Tree paint. Okay.
It just keeps the top bud from drying out prematurely. Yeah. And we can go now if you.
Okay.
Also a nursery crop, and but there's some cuttings here. This was just planted for nut tree seeds, and this bed of chestnuts is slated for grafting. So I'll be grafting these chestnuts next week. Okay. We planted it at double density, so we pulled out all the larger ones. These are 1-year-old seedlings. We pulled out all the larger ones and sold them as 1-year seedlings. We left these as rootstock for grafting this spring. And then when we graft them, they'll be up like this fall, and we'll sell them as grafted trees. And then here you can see where we planted some chestnuts in a bed, and they're just now starting to come up.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of squirrels around here, so we need to pull off this screen this week.
Yeah.
So that we don't lose too many leaves when we pull them up. So yeah, all this stuff will come off. Well, the paper I'll leave on as a mulch, just to suppress weeds. Because we're organic growers, so we don't use herbicides or anything. So
right.
And these are some chestnuts that are from a stool bed that I've created, where we're cloning trees on their own roots. So you can see this one's starting to make catkins already. Yeah. The male flowers are starting to form even in early May. But this was one that was, this is a variety that we introduced. This is a Japanese-European hybrid called Maraval that we introduced from Italy in 1998. And so it's got good resistance to blight and root rot, and it's a nice producer of nuts, and it's a nice big tree. And so these are some clones. I think these were just a little shy of roots, so we just planted them out to grow roots on them another year. And here's a gooseberry patch and a dogberry patch and a currant patch as a temporary in between the chestnuts, which are the chestnut orchard is being expanded in this direction. And here's a young chestnut orchard that was just planted and grafted a couple years ago. So this is a row right here of chestnuts. So in this case, the graft was made right there, and up
so, this high.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so and then here's another one here. In this case, it was made right there, and but these are all grafted trees. I just found the seedlings to be way too slow to start bearing and too variable in what they produce. So
what is the average time from first seedling to production? 8 to 10 years?
yeah, for average growth. I've seen seedlings produce flowers in 3 or 4 years, but to get actual nuts, it's usually longer than that. But these grafted trees are producing. This will be producing this year.
Yeah.
A lot of these had nuts even last year. So there's another grafted one there and there and there. It just goes
So
on.
it's a pretty. Looking at this, it looks like it would be a pretty wide spacing. That's because you're accounting for.
Oh, these will get big in a hurry.
Yeah,
Chestnuts get
so,
big in a hurry. These will be touching
potatoes.
branches in 15 years.
Yeah, so it's something good
yeah.
to point to notice there.
Yeah. And boy, we got a little sloppy in the cardboard here. But here's another row of chestnuts. I left the native hazel here. And here's another row of chestnuts.
So what kind of spacing are you? What's the average spacing that you recommend?
Well, let's see. So this is a delay. No, it's supposed to bend it. So let's see. 5, 10, 15, 20 feet.
About 20 feet.
Yeah. And here's the graft on this one. We're all grafted all the way over to the fence line, right? So yeah, this will fill in pretty quickly. And so you can see these chestnuts here at 20 feet, at a 20-foot spacing. They're all touching branches.
Yeah.
They're touching branches. So they're still producing nicely. This one's going to come out. This is a variety I introduced from Korea. It's worthless here. This tree I might take out also. This is a French variety, this is an Italian variety. This is Marron de Val de Susa, one of our best producers.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a wonderful nut.
I have one of those.
Yeah, very consistent producer, excellent flavor and yield. This is a French variety, Marron du Var. I think this would be an exceptional variety for drying, because here at least it's a smaller nut, but it's a single embryo. I don't get any multiple embryos with this variety, so it'd be perfect for drying.
So what you mean by that is that within a husk, there's generally only one nut.
No.
What do you mean by the single embryo?
In a husk, there's often 2 or 3 nuts.
Right.
Yeah. But when you have a single shell with 2 embryos in one shell, that's a multiple embryo.
Okay.
That means that it's going to be harder to peel. You got 2 things to peel rather than just one.
Oh.
And especially if you're going to be doing something like processing, like drying, you don't want multiple embryos.
Right.
You want a single nut.
Okay.
Not 2 nuts. If you plant a chestnut with 2 embryos in it, you're going to get 2 trees. They'll be right next to each other.
Yeah.
They'll be an inch apart, but there'll be 2 trees coming out of that one shell. So.
And you're attributing size to lending to being better for drying.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because it'll dry faster.
Yeah. So this is a variety that we introduced from Italy, but this is a cross between a European chestnut and a Japanese chestnut. This variety is called Marasari, and this grafted tree is 26 years old. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it's producing a couple 100 pounds a year.
Okay.
Yeah. So, very consistent. Large nuts. Yeah, typically. This is another Italian variety. This is my earliest ripening chestnut. This is called Primato. Primato. Very early ripening. They all stick in the husk. You have to physically remove them off, which is great if you have a whole lot of wildlife pressure. You don't have to be out there picking them every morning, because they're all in the husk. You can step on them to remove the nut from the husk. Just step on them and they'll pop right out of the husk.
Right.
Or you can pry them open with leather gloves.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all in the husk. Whereas some of these other varieties, the husk opens and the nuts fall free. So depends on what you want. All along the fence line here, the wildlife planters. Yeah, this is a volunteer.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one's very multi-stemmed.
Yeah.
That just naturally occurred. Or did you encourage that?
Just naturally occurred. And I evaluated this for nuts as a seedling, and I think I'm going to cut it down now, and I'll probably just graft. I'll just probably graft another variety that I want to try because it hasn't met expectations as a seedling, so I'm going to get rid of it. I'll just put another. I'll graft one of these suckers over and get rid of everything else.
Okay.
Yeah. But
So,
yeah.
With the many varieties that you have, I imagine someone who's trying to grow commercially, they may have a preference for varieties that all ripen at the same time, whereas someone who's a home grower who maybe just wants to have enough to eat throughout the year a little bit, they may be able to play around some more early ripeners or to later. But do you have any what would be like your top 5 if you could narrow it down to that for like a home producer?
Depends on where they live. Depends entirely on where they live. I'm not going to make that kind of statement.
Here in around this area.
Oh, in Western Washington?
Yeah.
Well, then you also have to have 2 varieties that are good pollen producers, because a lot of our best nut producers are not pollen producers. You know, for example, Colossal. Colossal is the #1 commercial variety in North America. We sell, over 1,000 grafted or self-rooted Colossal trees a year. But orchardists like it, especially in warmer climates. It's the most popular variety south of here in Western Washington. It's the most popular variety in the Willamette Valley. It's the most popular variety in the Hood River Valley. It's the most popular variety in Eastern Washington. It's the most popular variety in Michigan. Here, it's mediocre because it doesn't fill as well because we're at 1,100-foot elevation. We are cooler than the Vancouver, Washington area, or the Willamette Valley, or Eastern Washington, or Hood River. We're cooler. We have cooler nights, and so we have a greater proportion of not as large a nut as you would get in a warmer climate. Okay. So some of them are quite large, up to the name Colossal, and some of them are not. And some of them are a little shriveled, or some of them are, they're just not as consistent a producer at this elevation as they are in a hotter climate. So it would not be my top 5 at all.
Okay.
Marron de Val de Sousa would be one of the top 5. Bouche de Bédizac, but Bouche de Bédizac is pollen sterile, won't pollinate anything. So if you have a good producer, you need Marron de Val de Sousa. It's a good pollinator as well as a good nut. So, but it will need another variety. You can't pair it up with Bouche de Bédizac because Bouche de Bédizac won't pollinate it. They're not self-pollinating. The only variety of chestnut I know of that's self-pollinating is this one, Primato. And it's our earliest ripening nut. But here, it's kind of labor intensive because you got to extract them all from the husk and everything. And
so you would need 2 different varieties.
2 different pollen producers.
Yeah.
Like down here, I've got, let's see, the 4th tree down here is the variety that we introduced from France called Belle Épine. And it's a superb nut. It's a beautiful nut. And it tastes great. It's a very productive variety, and it's also an excellent pollinator. So that would be another variety that I would put at the top of my list.
Was Colossal pollen sterile as well? Or
pollen sterile.
It is.
Pollen sterile. Yeah. So, this is a Belle Épine tree right here, and this is another tree that we like a lot. This is a variety from Italy called Chrincoche Megule, a variety that we introduced from Italy.
I always wondered how you pronounce that name.
Yes, Chrincoche Megule is a very high yielder. It's very early ripening, just after Primato, and it's an outstanding pollinator too. And then the tree next to it, this tree here, Silverleaf. Silverleaf is a variety that's done very well for us. It's a high yielder, very good quality nuts, good sized nuts, and it's also a good pollinator. So I think that would be as good a top 5 as any. I could go on and on,
There was one here that you really liked for its timber form trait. Was that in this orchard here? Or?
Yeah, that's that tree over there. Yeah, but I'm it's an okay producer, but a lot of these would make good timber trees.
Right.
They really would.
Yeah.
If they were just pruned a little bit for that to start with. This is the prolific tree. Now this is a much younger tree than these others, and that's why it's kind of getting shaded out. This is a much more vigorous variety. This is an Italian variety called Broccola. It's got a terrible crotch angle here, but this is a very large nut.
Okay.
It's a very late ripening variety, but it has no problem ripening here. It always produces a nice crop. And this is a mature Bush de Bettizac tree. This is my original Bush de Bettizac tree, the tree that I was just grafting
an
hour ago. And it's excellent producers, very high yield. That's another Belle Épine tree there. And then here we have one of the problems with growing kiwi vines near trees. The kiwi vines want to climb the tree. See, there's kiwi vines 50 feet up into that tree from this trellis. They just started climbing and they just keep on going. Yeah. So, but these are great kiwi berries. They're the smooth skin ones that are very sweet and flavorful and very easy to grow organically here. And so we sell them as a fresh fruit, and we make wine out of them and jam out of them and sauce out of them.
Yeah. So when you're first, as far as like, when you first put chestnut kiwi in the ground, what kind of, are you worried about pruning? Like what would be so a single trunk growth structure is going to be best, but then are you worried about pruning out all the lower branches?
Well, in this case, what happened here is, see, this is a sign of neglect right here. This is a very weak crotch angle right here. This could easily tear out. And so this really should be sawed off right here, because this is just a weak joint. It's, you don't want an angle like that. They should be more of an angle like this to make a more solid joint. But what happened in the case of this tree was, we had an ice storm here. So you can see it's got a stump here. And what happened was the graft is actually right here, okay? So what happens, we had an ice storm, and because there was another branch higher up that had a weak crotch angle like this, that branch tore the whole trunk down, way down to here. And then this was just I had to cut it all off, and it just resprouted. And here, so I started retraining it from the one sprout, from this point basically. And then these are suckers, and I'm using these suckers as a source of cyanwood. So on the suckers that were part of the graft, because the graft is down here. So these suckers that have come up here, I prune them heavily for cyanwood, and for grafting more of this Precoce variety. So because when they're producing heavily, there's not a lot of good cyanwood growth up there. And if there is any up there, it's way up high, but there isn't really much, because it's putting all of its energy into nut production.
Right.
And I want cyanwood of a certain thickness and with lots of dormant buds and everything. And I'm getting it from these suckers from above the graft. And and I sell the cyanwood at $5 a foot. So in addition to using it for my own grafting. So I was able to take, enough cyanwood just from these suckers to make probably 100 grafts.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's why I left these. Otherwise, I would get rid of all this stuff and just retrain this. And, and in other cases, I might be, some of these trees I have on their own roots, so I could turn them into stool beds if I get around to it, or I just haven't removed the suckers. In this case, I'm contemplating removing the tree, so I left the suckers so I could just regraft the root system over to something else.
Okay.
So, like all of these right here, this is a tree I'm planning on taking out.
Okay.
But all of these suckers right here, these are all last summer's growth.
Yeah.
This is all last summer's growth, and that's without even taking this out. So if we took that out, it would grow like 10 feet. The suckers would be 10 feet tall. Here's the tree that we took out. So this is 2 years old. Wow. Yeah. This is what you cut down the tree. You cut down the chestnut tree. This is what you would expect in 2 years. Yeah. So, you know, if you needed something this diameter for, you know, like bean poles or something like that, this is good material for that. Actually, that 1 year material is good for bean poles and for nursery stakes and something like that.
Yeah.
So you could manage this, if you just let these grow another few years, you'd have nice fence post material. You know, in 5 years, you'd have this kind of caliper. Nice fence post material.
Yeah.
So just cut it to the ground, and then it would do the whole thing again and again. It could do that for 100 years. Every year, just throwing up shoots like crazy from the earth. This is one of the first seedlings I planted. This is a seedling of a chestnut that I planted, you know, like 35 years ago. So it produces a decent crop, you know, but you know it's not good enough to replicate.
Sure.
But yeah.
And you're not worried about any kind of fertilizing, or because I mean they drop enough organic matter down that just does it for it.
Yeah, they don't really need to be fertilized, no. Except, you know, if they're young or something, but you want to get them up to berry age a little quicker. Here's an instance where the grass is more vigorous than the rootstock.
Yeah, that's funny.
And there's the grafting. This is the Italian variety Braccola, and it's a very vigorous variety with a great big nut.
Yeah.
And it's much more vigorous than.
How old is this one here?
Oh, it's probably 10 years or so.
Do you foresee it, perhaps this one getting too thick where the bottom can't handle it, or maybe?
Probably not.
No,
probably not. But it is pretty crowded in here. A lot of these trees should come out. This is a colossal. This should come out. Most of these should come out. I'll probably keep. I'll keep a few of these trees. This is another bush of Betty Jack, so this is going to be the dominant tree here. You know, since the nut trees are heavy nitrogen users and are producing high protein crops with cells and husks that are removed every year, we thought interplanting with these nitrogen these nice husks. This is autumn olive in bloom right now, and it's a superb jam. And cooking the fruit actually makes more of the beneficial lycopenes available to the human body, you know, which is cancer medicine in a jar. And plus, if you eat the seeds, good source of fiber and beneficial fat and protein. Very unusual in a fruit.
Right.
But yeah, these are different clones of autumn olive, red ones and amber ones. This is amber. And another nice picture here. This is golden silverberry. This is one of my selections. This is a selection of red leaf hazelnuts. So this had red catkins in the winter, and well, actually, this is purple Fortin. This is purple Fortin hazelnut, and then the reddish purple leaves, and then the husks are even red.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's very red, and I rescued the tree from a site in Bellevue that was about to be bulldozed from an old homestead by a Frenchman who named it after him.
Okay.
And this is another nitrogen fixing crop. This is gumi here.
Whoa, man, that looks crazy.
Yeah. This thing is a real money maker. I make thousands of dollars from this one bush. Yeah.
It's the biggest one I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's excellent jam, and you're very nutritious and good nitrogen fixer.
Which variety is this one here?
This is the original Carmine Gumi.
Carmine.
Yeah. So it's been a learning experience, you know, and it's you know, dealing with all these different varieties.
Right.
You know, the evaluation process, you know, it takes a number of years. And so I've had to cull a lot of trees in the interim, but now I feel confident, you know, that we've got a lot of data on varieties that are appropriate to Western Washington.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah. So I see good things for chestnut because it's such a versatile nut. It's got great taste, you know, to it. We sell a chestnut cookbook and written by a neighbor of ours, and I think that the prospects for greater consumption of chestnuts is good. And I like it from the sustainable homesteading thing too. You know, I mean, it's really to us it's a staple food.
Yeah.
And it could be it's an easy food to grow, like I say. So versatile, so dependable.
Right. Yeah, because
so
it's an
many
annual
ways.
bear.
Yeah. And with the wildlife protection that it offers, like with the hazelnuts, you know, and the walnuts, I have to be right on top of the harvest to beat the squirrels and the jays to the crop every year. I mean, actually, physically picking them the day they're ripe. With chestnuts, they're just more forgiving with that prickly husk.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So for people who want to buy plants from you, the website's the best place.
Burnt Ridge Nursery.
Your local,
that shows current availability, or they can
Yep.
let us know if they want a print catalog. We're still putting those out.
When's the best time? Is there like when do you guys just update inventory as?
Well, yeah, on the website it's current inventory. It's whatever.
Okay.
If it's still listed online, then it's available. So.
Okay, it's pretty much all bare root sales.
No.
Oh,
We
you
have
do
potted
pot-
plants. Too.
Okay.
Yeah, we have quite a few hundred chestnuts in pots.
Okay.
So some are available even in the summertime, and
Okay.
some are available in the fall. But the greatest selection is in the dormant season.
Right. And then you also, besides plants, you also sell signwood and then
Sell
the straight
signwood, we
seed,
sell
seed
seeds.
nuts.
And we sell eating nuts. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of options out there if somebody wants to grow their own,
Right.
whatever they can afford. you
Sure.
know. Certainly the grafted trees or self-rooted trees will give the quickest returns with the best, most consistent results. So. But seedlings can also work, especially for the homeowner. I would just go with a much greater density and thin to the best ones.
Sure.
Or just graft them over.
Right.
After they evaluate the ones that are not worth keeping, they can be grafted over. It's not that difficult. We've posted the grafting video on our website, you know, about grafting chestnuts. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. I've learned a lot with
Yeah.
talking with you. Really valuable experience. And I think a lot of people had the same questions that I did. So
Great.
very, very informative.
All right.
So thanks so much for letting us come out and
Yeah.
check the place out.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
And
Thank
you also do a couple of tours during the year, don't you?
Yeah, we do tours in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah, anybody I did that a while back, and I thought it was really awesome. It was long too. It was like 2 or 3 hours of us strolling around. So it was definitely worth it.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah.